Good morning, everybody. Wonderful. Some of us are awake. If you are in the foyer, it is now 10 o'clock. We're getting ready to start. I invite you to come inside. We're so happy to see everybody. Thank you and welcome. If we've never met before, make sure I learn your name and your face. I see you too. But we're going to get ready. We're going to start this time, our two-part seminar, our one-day two-part seminar with some songs. We're going to get the blood flowing, the brain thinking, and we're going to stand up and sing. Our first song is a good hymn, an old hymn, but a good hymn, A Shelter in the Time of Storm. Okay, word should be up here for you guys. The Lord's our rock, in him we hide, a shelter in the time of storm, secure whatever may betide, a shelter in the time of storm. Mighty rock in a weary land, cooling shade on the burning sand, faithful guide for the pilgrim band, a shelter in the time of storm, a shade by day, defense by night, a shelter in the time of storm. No fears alarm, no foes affright, a shelter in the time of storm. Mighty rock in a weary land, cooling shade on the burning sand, faithful guide for the pilgrim band, a shelter in the time of storm. O rock divine, O refuge dear, a shelter in the time of storm. Be thou our helper ever near, a shelter in the time of storm. Mighty rock in a weary land, cooling shade on the burning sand, faithful guide for the pilgrim band, a shelter in the time of storm. Okay, I'm only going to have you stand up for this next song, but it's a song made popular by Chris Tomlin, Whom Shall I Fear? It's called Angel Armies, and I like this. You will deliver me. Yours is already the victory, so who shall I fear? Nobody. So let's sing this together. You hear me when I call. You are my morning song. Though darkness fills the night, it cannot hide the light. Whom shall I fear? You crush the enemy underneath my feet. You are my sword and shield, though troubles linger still. Whom shall I fear? I know who goes before me. I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. My strength Okay, you may be seated. This next song is our last song for this time, and we're going to use this as our theme song. So if you don't know it, you'll have a chance to sing it with us again before the second part, but it's called Still. Hide me now under your wings. Cover me within your mighty hand. When the oceans rise and thunders roar, I will soar with you above the storm. Father, you are king over the flood. I will be still and know you are God. Find rest, my soul, in Christ alone. Know his power in quietness and trust. When the oceans rise and thunders roar, I will soar with you above the storm. Father, you are king over the flood. I will be still and know you are God. I will be still and know you are God.
Up here, is this on? I'm going to stand up here because if I stand, I really would like to stand down there, but I know folks up there won't be able to see me if I stand on the floor. But I'm glad that you are here this morning. And how about this? I don't have the time to go and say hi to each of you and learn your name. So how about this? On the count of 3, just shout out your name. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3. Yes. I didn't get any of that. All right, that didn't work. All right. I'm glad that you are here this morning. And my name is Greg, and I'm the pastor of the church here. And my background is I've been pastoring for 30 years. And I also, along with pastoring, have been a counselor for 30 years, individual and family counseling. And so the reason I mention that is because in our message today, in our 2-part seminar, you're going to hear a lot of Bible, and you're also going to hear a lot of mental health information. Is that all right? Like it's going to be a combination. Going to be like, well, where's this guy coming from? What? So just so you know a little of my background and experience, that'll help explain why we're going to use both of those today. And I think we are not exaggerating when we said in our flyer and our advertising information that today has the potential to be absolutely life-changing for you today. And I've been praying for this time that God would just pour out His Spirit upon us and that we could experience more certainty, more satisfaction in our daily living, and that we could literally come to a prescription that fights stress, anxiety, care, and worry. So that's where we are headed today. And before we get into starting the seminar, I just want to start with the word of prayer. Would you bow your heads and let's approach God in prayer for this special time today. God in heaven, we are thankful to be here. There's a lot of other places we could be, but we've chosen to be here today. A lot of us here at church, some visiting and watching online. I just pray that your Spirit would really take each word that you've given me and personalize it and individualize it for each person that hears it. And God, we're looking for some radical change to take place in our lives. We want to experience more certainty in our life. There's a lot of instability surrounding us. So God, we're just praying that you would show up, that you would show off today in what you are going to do through our time together. So thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, let me start with just a couple of very simple questions. And in this is going to be a seminar format where if you have a question, or when I ask a question, please go ahead and use your voices and answer if you would like to. I'm going to try to make this a little bit interactive so that you can have kind of a say in the flow in where things go. So how is your courage today? How would you answer that? Good? Anybody here great? Courage is great. How about if I asked, how full is your satisfaction and happiness meter? How many of you could say it's at least pretty full, almost full? Raise your hand. All right, that's excellent. I won't have others raise. You know, you might be coming here today and you're looking for some encouragement. You're looking for I'm trying to make this very practical way for us to approach a more doubt-filled, less doubt in our life, and more experience with God that will give us trust. So it's so hard for me. This is one of the things I hear often from people as I journey with them in counseling or visit with them as a pastor. It's hard for me to experience consistent happiness and satisfaction because I have so many worries and fears, things that I'm afraid of. They rob me of my peace. And I wonder if that's a statement, and maybe not the exact wording that you would say, but something that you can identify and relate to, that you also would like to have more peace because there's things around us, things we can't control outside of our control that try to rob us of that assurance and peace. So fears and phobias are actually one of the most prevalent forms of mental anxiety disorders that affect people, especially in the United States, of all age groups, and they interfere with daily life. So let's start off today trying to identify some of the most common fears that we experience. And as I'm going through these 10, I'd like for you to think for your own self, if we're going to think of your own things that you fear maybe in your life, did we hit them in this top 10 list? Number 10 on the list is the fear of growing old. Oh, I'd have to kind of raise my hand on that one. That one seems to stalk me every once in a while. I'm 58 years old, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting a little bit older. So fear of growth. Number 9, fear of, this one doesn't, fear of getting poisoned. That one surprised me a little bit. Fear of being a coward. Fear of bacteria and microorganisms, germophobia. Fear of going crazy. Oh, I hear that from folks. You'd be surprised how many wonder. I mean, am I something going on with me? I'm feeling a little out of sorts. Fear of intimacy is a big one. Relational problem. Fear of, we'll just put this all in a category. Fear of spiders, rats, cockroaches, snakes, airplanes, monsters, demons, mirrors. And I don't know why this one made the list. Ladies, can you explain this one? High heels. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe someone can explain that one to me later. Number 3, things that we fear. Social phobia, fear of public speaking. And I don't know why they put these two together. Agoraphobia, which is the fear of open spaces. Number 2, fear of death. That one doesn't surprise us, right? I think a lot of us can identify with that one. But what do you think number 1 was on the list? Fear of public speaking. That was up there, right? We did a public speaking one. What do you think number 1 made the list in the survey? This was done in the United States. No, it wasn't that. Going to hell. Wow, we are right out there today. We're just going to lay it on the line. Fear of loneliness. Fear of loneliness. Do you think that is maybe as a result, or as we've moved through a couple years of pandemic, of COVID, different things? I wonder if that has crept up on our list to reach the number 1 spot. What else do you fear? Anybody want to? I know it's pretty brave of you to just shout out loud. What are some of the other things you fear that were not on the top 10? You don't want to be in the jar, right? Sitting so that you can't get out. Or don't want to be trapped, right? Anybody else? What do you fear? UFOs. All right, interesting. Anybody else? I mean, we could talk about as a nation, we fear the financial collapse. We fear about maybe the United States getting into war. There's so many things. What do you fear, PJ? Oh, right. What'd you say? Climate change. That's a big one. Talked about in many articles if you follow your news feed. So here's just another list of things that you could throw up there that might register somewhere, at least be on your radar, of some of the things that can kind of rob you of peace and contentment because you're fearful and you're worrying about some of these other things. I thought this is interesting. Did you see this article? It actually came out May 1. It was republished May 6. So we're just talking last 30 days, that the U.S. Surgeon General released an 85-page advisory declaring a new health epidemic in the United States. Does anybody want to guess, or did you read the story? What is the new epidemic? I put pandemic. It's epidemic in the United States. Anybody want to guess? Here's what he said: loneliness. Loneliness. So the headline read, U.S. Surgeon General cites loneliness as serious mental health hazard in a new report. And I'm just taking one sentence from his report. Our epidemic of loneliness and isolation has been an underappreciated, notice his words, public health crisis that has harmed individual and societal health. I mean, that shocked me to see. I knew just from walking and journeying with a lot of different people, I knew that it was up there, but for the top doctor in the United States to declare the United States to have an epidemic of loneliness, quite revealing to us. And again, I can't help but wonder how going through our COVID days and months and years had an effect on that. So how do I manage today, let alone keep from worrying about things that might come tomorrow? 500 years ago, Michael de Montaigne said this: my life has been filled with terrible misfortune, most of which never happened. You think that's true? Could we say that in our life today? Now, there's a recent study that actually proves that he was right 500 years ago. This study looked into how many of our imagined calamities actually never happen or never materialize. So here's how the study went. Subjects were asked to write down all their different worries over an extended period of time, and then after this long period of time, they went back and they were to actually figure out, did what they imagined to happen, did it happen? So does anybody want to guess what percentage of subjects worried about things that actually never, ever happen? You want to guess a percentage? 85%. So 85% is the starting point. 85% of the things that we worry about, when we look back, they actually never transpired at all. And with the 15%, the rest of the 15% of the 100, they found out that the things that did happen, 79% of subjects discovered either they could handle the difficulty better than they had expected, or the difficulty actually taught them a lesson that they found worth learning. So that means that 97% of what you worry over, what I worry over, this is according to the results of the survey, this is their words, not much more than a fearful mind punishing you with exaggerations and misperceptions. How many of you think that that's true today? Can we, yeah, I think that's true. We do worry about things that never come about. So many people actually wake up worrying about bad things that might happen during the day that they're facing. And later, when they go to bed at night, they also find themselves worrying about these unsettling, unresolved problems that they need to fix that might happen, remember, might happen tomorrow. So I wonder why it is that we worry so much. So I enjoy doing a lot of reading. I try to do as much reading as I can. And I found this article that I thought was really, I'm just going to share 2 points that psychcentral.com, and this article entitled, Why Do We Worry So Much? I just want to share 2 reasons that they brought up. And what I want you to do is I just want you to kind of do a little self-reflection. I mean, is it true in your own life that this is why you worry? So, number 1, your natural alarm system, the way in which we are created, alerts us to potential danger. So let's have one of the psychologists explain. When you sense a threat, real or perceived, and we found out from the survey we just read, a lot of it is perceived, a stress signal is sent to the brain. In everyday life, this can manifest in the form of worrying. And while it can be helpful in some cases, often stress can be, there's also good stress. Oftentimes, it turns into an ongoing loop that just kind of plays over and over in your mind, and it's hard to stop. We worry because we're constantly trying to figure out how to solve our problems, or life's problems, or the world's problems, or the U.S. problems, right? By nature, humans are problem solvers, and that's according to the psychotherapist Valentina Dragomar. And she continues, she said, as soon as we identify a problem, even if it's just something that's been nagging at us, our brains start churning out, are you relating to this? Your brains start churning out all the different possible solutions. And the more emotionally invested, something with your child, something with your own health, right? The more emotionally invested we are in a problem, the more worry we actually feel, right? So worry, she continues, is caused by anticipation of a future negative event. It's a type of anxiety that usually is based on irrational thoughts. This is her words, and she includes, what if something bad happened? These are some of the questions that run around in our mind. What if I can't handle it? Have you ever played the what if game in your mind, by the way? Anybody do that? You catch yourself, what if? What if? Let me give you some examples. So, what if I get sick? What if my child gets sick? What if I don't do well on the presentation at work? What if I don't pass the test that I got to take? What if she says no to me in my inquiry to her, right? What if the economy tanks? What if our country gets involved in a war? What if I can't pay my bills this month? What if the doctor's phone call is bad news? What if the environment, we saw mentioned, melts away? So these are all things that start with those words, what if? And so I'll just pause for a moment and have you think, just do a little assessment in your own mind for a moment. What are the what if questions running around in your mind? Because those what if scenarios is what really boosts and fuels the worry and the stress that comes upon us. So back to our article, why do we worry so much? Here's number 2. Fear of losing control. And here's what she says. While people may worry for a wide variety of reasons, it mostly, not always, but mostly comes from a place of fear. Either a fear of being judged or a fear of something happening, I think this was more prevalent, happening that they cannot control. Do you find that true in your own lives? That you're fearful, you're worrying about things that you actually don't have, you feel like you're losing control of, or you have no control over. Sometimes, she continues, people worry because they have a lot of responsibility at work or a lot of responsibility in their home. And sometimes people worry because their life is just, catch this, generally chaotic and uncertain. And that just feeds this furious cycle, this damaging cycle of the what-ifs that take place in our lives. So let's be honest. This is me speaking now. There are many thoughts and playlist tracks running around inside our head which can steal away our certainty. And how do I define certainty? Certainty is living without fear and living without doubt. That's how I'm going to, when I use the word today, I'm going to talk about certainty, living without fear and without doubt. So when we put this little flyer out, by the way, how many of you are here that you've already you saw this flyer in some format? Raise your hand. I'm just curious. All right, good. So some, maybe a personal invite from someone that you came. We had this on Facebook. We passed them out in the neighborhoods. Friends passing them out. But we decided to focus this seminar on this topic because we did a little survey and asking people what subjects, what topics would be the most interesting for you, but also think of your friends, think of your neighbors, think of your family that you think would be pertinent, relevant, a topic that they would be interested in hearing. So what we're going to do in this first session is I want to set a biblical story, a narrative for us that's going to lead us into learning about how we can live with confidence and with assurance today. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a person in the Bible, a story, a narrative of a person in the Bible who I'm pretty confident that most of us have at least heard about. And I'm going to use his story to really be our case study today of how to live when things are falling apart around, things are happening that we cannot control around us. We feel like we're in the middle of a storm. How can we live with God as our refuge during that time? So, I'm going to talk about David today. Everybody heard of David before in the Bible? So the Bible dedicates 66 chapters to David's story, which is the most in the Bible, save the chapters dedicated to Jesus Christ. In fact, the top people in the Bible where there are chapters devoted to their story, here is the list of them, and you'll notice that even Moses, I was a little surprised, right? I thought, there's a lot of chapters on the story of Moses, right? 66 chapters in the Bible dedicated, so that tells me that the story of David is worth studying and examining and learning from today. So the New Testament even mentions David's name. David is, of course, told about mainly in 1 Samuel and 1 Chronicles. Even the New Testament mentions his name 59 times, and there are none more significant in the title that I really appreciate about Jesus when it describes Jesus Christ, the Son of God, as being from the line of David and being actually called the Son of David. So he, David, will establish and inherit the world's most famous city, Jerusalem. The greatest psalms will flow from his pen and his heart. Bible readers from all ages will call him minstrel. They'll call him warrior. They'll call him giant slayer. They'll call him King David, right? So David, what's interesting is at the beginning of how he we start to begin the origin of his story in the Bible is it describes that God was looking for a new king to replace Saul. God was disappointed with Saul. And so God was looking for a new king. And the Bible says that what God was looking for is a man who was after the heart of God. And the Bible comes out and says that David was this man after God's own heart. So a shepherd boy, David was. He was appointed by the prophet Samuel as Israel's next king. You remember the great story that took place when he's on his trip to go visit his brothers and hears about the showdown that's happening there in the valley. And he hears the calls of this giant Goliath. You know the story, right? I mean, we love this story of Goliath going down with just a slingshot, a sling and some rocks, and the faith of this young boy running to the battle to face Goliath. We love that story. But I want to pick up our story shortly after this time. Pick up the story of David after these most famous ones, shepherding, killing a lion, killing a bear that talks about he was a great shepherd, writing his Psalms, right? We find David, though, as we fast forward in his story, in a place that no one would have guessed early on that that's where David would be. So we're going to go to the Dead Sea for just a moment. The Dead Sea, I know this sounds strange, the Dead Sea is dying. Drop by drop, at the rate of 3 feet each year, she is actually shrinking. So while Galilee sends her its fresh water through the Jordanian canal, which, by the way, was worthy of a Messiah's baptism, the Dead Sea impoverishes it, darkening, it's acidic, it creates a saline cemetery. There is little life in the surroundings of the Dead Sea. Ominous cliffs rise to the west, flattening out at 2,000 feet. Erosion scars the land into this tyranny of caves and ruts and sparse canyons. Its inhabitants are lizards, hyenas, buzzards, and David, right? David. What is David doing in this wilderness area? He's not there by choice, mind you. He didn't want to swap the palace for the Badlands. After all, let's be honest, no one really would choose a wilderness experience. But let's be honest, a lot of us have gone through seasons of our life where we find ourselves in our own wilderness habitat. But sometimes we have no vote in the matter. Who can predict when a calamity strikes or a pandemic cripples and all of a sudden life takes this unexpected, tragic turn and leaves us frazzled, quaking, and unsettled? And I'll call those times a dry season, a wilderness season for you in your life. So dry seasons are always marked by several things. Isolation. Dry seasons are marked by fear. Dry seasons are marked by restlessness. They're also marked by this overwhelming sense, more than just a feeling, but this overwhelming sense of helplessness. So David was going through his dry season. I want to tell you a little bit about the story of David that gives us the setting of why he ends up here in this very wilderness place. So King Saul has effectively and systematically isolated David from every source of stability. And as I'm sharing this information about David, I just want you to think of your own life. Do any of the details of David's life actually kind of mirror, you see a lot of things that remind you of things happening in your own life? Saul has attempted to kill Bethlehem's prodigy child many times. In fact, 6 different times Saul is going to try to kill David. All right. So first time he tries to kill him, he convinces David after slaying Goliath. He's getting very popular. He decides he's going to give his daughter Michal to be married to David. And it seems like a kind gesture by King Saul until you read the account about the dowry that was requested by dear old dad. You know what the dowry was? Have you read this story? 100 Philistine foreskins. Now, you probably didn't come to the seminar today thinking we're going to be talking about 100 Philistine foreskins. But this is interesting because notice, Dad was thinking to himself, surely one of these nasty Philistines are going to kill David, and then my problem with David is solved. Well, it didn't work so well, and David ends up returning to Saul with double, not just 100, he comes with 200, the amount requested, and plops them down for the proof in front of Saul. But Saul doesn't give up. He orders his servants, we know, and he orders even his son Jonathan to go and to kill David, but they refuse. David is kind of like the road runner staying ahead of Wile E. Coyote. Is that too old of an example? How many of you remember Road Runner? Okay, thank you. I was wondering, this might be too old to be able. All right, good. All right, appreciate that. So that's David, right? And to make matters worse, David has actually done nothing wrong. Listen to what the Bible has to say about David in 1 Samuel chapter 18. He behaved wisely in all his ways. Verse 16 says, all Israel, and this is impressive, not just Israel, also Judah, that should be loved, that's a mistake there. They loved David. And David behaves, according to verse 30, more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name became highly esteemed. Have you ever been stalked by an enemy and you knew that you had done nothing wrong? Now, it's one thing when you've done something wrong. Okay, that's another kind of running. But when you are dogged by others around you and you know that you are innocent of whatever it is that they are angry or angst against you, that's an extremely challenging situation to go through. So, David has a powerful enemy. Maybe someone here today, part of your worry is an angry ex. Maybe it's a boss. Maybe it's a family member that throws the tirades. Maybe you actually have an enemy that is pursuing you. So you know you can relate to what David is going through. So here's what happens. He ends up marrying Michal, and she learns that her dad is trying to kill and is going to attempt to kill David. So she makes a nighttime escape out the window so David gets away. And he was successful in escaping. But when Saul, her dad, demanded an explanation of how did David escape, his wife Michal buckled under the fear and lied to her dad and said, I had to. He threatened to kill me if I didn't help him. Wow. So David never trusted his wife again. Let's just say they stayed married, but they slept in separate beds. Is that clear enough for us? All right. So David races from Saul's court to Samuel's house. But no sooner does he arrive when someone tells Saul, take note, David is close by. He's in Ramah, Go, he's there, go get him. So David he flees again, and this time he goes to Jonathan, his soulmate. It's a great story in the Bible about friendship, the importance of community with friends, but to have that BFF, your best friend. Jonathan was the BFF, right? He wanted to help, but what could he do in helping David? Because he knew that if he leaves with David and leaves the palace area, what's going to happen to the court and to the people if he can't help control his dad, right? His dad is a little crazy, right? So Jonathan ends up staying at home with Saul and not leaving with David. So let's recap. There's no place in court for David. There's no position in the army. There's no wife, no priest, and no friend. That's where we are so far in the story with David. So David can feel the last threads of his life ropes unraveling. So what is it that David decides to do? What does he decide? My only option I have left, I'm going to run, right? I'm going to flee. Anybody had to run before? Have you ever had to flee trouble, flee something that's stalking you, dogging you? You just had to leave one area and get out and get to somewhere else because that was the only option that you had left. Now, remember this. This is important. So wilderness experiences always begin with disconnecting from others. It often continues with deceit. So I just want you to think about that for a moment. Think of your life right now. Are you living a life of isolation away? Remember we talked about aloneness, loneliness, epidemic in the U.S. Just want you to think about your own. Am I surrounded? Am I part of community? Am I a part of family? Am I part of group? Or have I isolated myself? Because if you experience isolation, you are already have one of the key ingredients for a wilderness experience. So next in the story comes this fearful, discontent heart of David. David runs to the priest at Nob. And while the city was holy, David was anything but. He lied every time he opens his mouth as he speaks to the priest, right? Whether it's about the bread, whether it's about taking the actual sword of Goliath. Remember the same sword that David had used to chop off the head of Goliath? It's there at Nob in display, and David takes it because he says, I don't have access. Remember, he lies, I'm on Saul's errand, give me some. And just when you think that things possibly, David lying over and over to the priest of all people, you think things can't get worse, it actually does get worse for David. I want to show you what happens next. David actually runs next, can't go home, can't go to Samuel, can't go to the priests. David runs to Gath. You remember what Gath is? Gath is the hometown village of who? Goliath. You remember Goliath, right? So David tries to actually form an alliance, a friendship, based on a mutual enemy. And here's probably the thinking of David. If your enemy is Saul and my enemy is Saul, we should become friends, right? See how we're not thinking very clearly when we start running, right? So you're wrong, David. The Gittites aren't exactly hospitable folk, especially to bygone heroes who have slayed their champion. In fact, the Bible tells us the reaction of the king. This is kind of humorous. Isn't this David, the king of the land? Look, they're calling him the king of the land, even though Saul's still king. Isn't he the one that people honor with dances and singing? They sing, Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000. David panics. There's no remembrance of God at this point in his life. Remember, we would love to hear him get out his harp and start playing some song about God as my refuge. We would love to hear the shepherd boy do something to demonstrate his heart after God. But we see that at this time, it's not coming because David is on the run and his thoughts are far from God. Instead, David takes matters into his own hands. And what does he do? He comes up with this plan. This is crazy, right? I'm going to pretend that I'm mad. So what David does, I know it sounds strange, right? So as crazy as it sounds, David pretends to be crazy. And here's the reaction of the king in Gath. Must you bring me this madman? We already have enough of them around here. Why should I let someone like this be my guest? And I will say this about our running. I will say this about our aloneness and our wilderness experiences. Often we act a little crazy, right? Do you ever find yourself when you're running and you're kind of doing things on your own and your mind's not really set or thinking on God and Him being your refuge, right? Have you noticed that when you try to do your own thing, you kind of take a look in the mirror sometimes and you say, man, am I going crazy? What am I doing? Why am I doing the things that I am doing? So David is scratching on doors. He's drooling and spitting. It's running down his beard. He's staring with galvanized eyes. He's quivering like jelly. He sticks his tongue out. He rolls in the dirt. He grunts and he spins. That's basically what the Bible says. I'm just putting it into other words, right? And strange to envision our David pretending of all things to be insane, isn't it? Where has David gone in his mind that this is solution of being protected? So, after being kicked, yes, he was kicked out of Gath. They didn't kill him because he feigned madness. They didn't want to touch him. Where does David run to next? So in your life, there may be, we got quite a group here today. There may be someone here today that's the question you're asking yourself. Where do I run to next? Like what's working? It's not working right now. What's going on in my life? Where do I go next? So he can't go to the court of Saul. He can't go to the house of his wife. The city of Samuel, he can't go to Nob. So he goes to the only place where he can, the place where no one else goes because nothing survives there. David heads toward the wilderness, the desert, to the honeycombed canyons that overlook the Dead Seas. And that's where we find our hero, David, right? The Bible says it this way in verse 1 in 1 Samuel chapter 22. So David left Gath, remember where he had acted and feigned being crazy, and he escaped. He barely got out of Gath, and he escaped to the cave of Adullam. I want you to say the word with me for just a moment. Say Adullam, would you? Adullam. So Adullam is going to be the place where David run to. So again, I just want you to pause for a moment and think about your own life. Where are you at in your journey of life? You may be on the run. Maybe you find yourself in a position that you're not even sure exactly how you got there. But I got some good news for you. Hang on for just a moment. Can you relate to David's experience? Has your Saul cut you off from the position that you had and the people that you love? In an effort to land on your feet, have you stretched the truth? Have you distorted facts? Have you isolated yourself, convincing yourself that there's nowhere for me to turn, no one who cares, no one to help? Maybe you're seeking refuge in a strange place, Gath. Oh, under normal circumstances, you would never go there, to that establishment, to that place, to that home. But these aren't normal circumstances, are they? Are you loitering with the giants, befriending the enemy, walking shady streets and frequenting questionable places? When you look in the mirror, do you see only a shell of the person staring back at you that you used to be? Can you relate to the story of David? Are you running wild but not really sure where to run? Are you fearful much of your day? You're walking on eggshells, just wondering, when's the next crisis? You know it's coming around the corner. When's the next fall? Let's learn from David's story. Better yet, let's learn from God's treatment of and His plan for David. The hero in the story ends up being, not David, the hero in the story ends up being God. Is that true? Right? So it takes place in the cave of Adullam. That's where David gathers himself. The faithful shepherd boy now resurfaces in the cave. The giant killer rediscovers his courage. I'll give you just a little idea. If you think about, if you know where Bethlehem is, if you know where some of these places are, you can see Adullam right there close to, overlooking to the west from the sea, the Dead Sea. Now, the word Adullam has come to mean refuge. So there's really only one quiz question here today, and that is, what does Adullam mean? So what is the answer? Okay, what does Adullam mean? Refuge. It's very important for what we're going to end with today that when you hear the word Adullam, that what comes to your mind is refuge. The place of refuge that God provides for David and will supply and apply for you. So there's a reason that refuge ends up being one of the most mentioned words in David's Psalms. At least 40 times in David's Psalms alone, you will find the word fortress or refuge, right? They can be used synonymously, but never did the word mean more to David than in his Psalm, Psalm 57. And the title of that psalm, catch this, a song of David when he fled from Saul into the what? What is the name of the cave? Adullam, right? So David, he wrote 2 psalms while he was in the cave of Adullam, and he describes his experience. Listen to verse 1. We'll come back to this a little later, but listen to what David says. Be merciful to me. Remember his experience, his surrounding, his wilderness, his desert, his wanderings, his running. Be merciful to me, O God. Be merciful to me. For my soul trusts in you, and in the shadow of your wings I will make my what? Refuge. Until these calamities, everything that's happened, I'm just going to take refuge in you, God, until all of these other circumstances, all these other troubles have passed me by. Is that a great way to live, by the way? Does that take a lot of faith? Faith to believe that? We'll talk about it more in a little bit. So let me give you just a couple things to think about now, and then in the second session, we're going to cover this more. So in the Wilderness Survival Guide, that's what I'm going to call it, Wilderness Survival Guide. I'm just going to make 2 points. Wilderness survivors find refuge in God's presence. If your life right now, you're identifying with so many of the points in David's life, man, this is what happened to my family, this is what, I'm on the run, I've got enemies, I'm lying, I'm not the same person I used to. Wilderness survivors, they actually find refuge in the presence of God, right? And the other thing to remember that's related is God sends help to wilderness runners by sending other people to help. Have you experienced that? To listen, to come alongside, to journey with you, to come and be with you. So here's what happened in the Bible, and we'll take a break right after this. So the Bible says soon, so after David had moved to the cave of Adullam, soon David's brothers and other relatives joined him there. Oh, this is good. Then, by the way, he wasn't on great terms with his brothers, right? When you read about it. So that's amazing. Then others, not just family, others began coming. Men who were in trouble or in debt or who were, I love this word, discontented, until David was the leader of how many? 400 men finally were gathered in the cave of Adullam. That's my timer to tell us we're going to take a break. So we're almost there. So think about the group that God sent. This is amazing. He sent people to David who were distressed. That just simply means they were in trouble. They were in debt, and they were discontent with society around them. They were also discontent in the way in which life was treating them. Discontent, right? And not many of these, according to this list, would have made West Point, right? They were misfits. They were dregs from the societal barrel. They were rejects and dropouts. By the way, that sounds a lot like the crowd and the 12 also that followed Jesus, doesn't it? So strong friend networks, small groups, and families are populated with current and former cave dwellers, people who know full well the terrain of Adullam. I hope that you have your cave dwellers in your life. You know, sometimes we think, well, I mean, to be a good friend, it's got to be somebody who's faithful, consistent, has their act together. I'm not convinced that's the case. What we really need is someone who's loyal. Someone who will journey and come into my calamity, my wilderness, and come alongside me and journey with me. They don't have to be experts. They don't have to be professionals. I just need them to come and to be with me. Let's dwell together. Let's be together in community. So people who have told a few lies, people who have deceived a few people, folks who have gone a little loopy in Gath, people with fractured marriages and abandoned friendships, people who are asking, where do I go next? What does David do with this motley group that comes to him? Does he turn them away? After all, David's not really a great candidate for priest or leader with what's happened recently. Can we be completely honest for just a moment? And then we'll take the break. You and I are broken people. You and I all need healing. And let me say one more thing. And this now comes to segueing to just put my counselor hat on for just a moment. The best place for healing, the best environment for healing to take place is actually in community. It's actually being surrounded by the group, the friends, the family, the misfits, right? Others who are also struggling. Best healing takes place in my life when I'm surrounded by a community of friends. So we aren't always telling the truth when our response to, how are you doing today, right? You always get that, how you doing? And our quick response is, oh, I'm doing fine. Is that always the truth? It's not always the truth, right? So David ends up creating a community of God-seeking misfits. And what does God do in response? I want to show you this. God forges a mighty group. In fact, the Bible is going to call it an army, a group of them. It says they came to David day by day to help him until it was a great army like the army of who? What? What? I love that about God. So Adullam, meaning refuge, is God's plan for you and I today. So we're going to stop there for just a moment. I want to tell you a couple things about our break. So I want you to take just a 10-minute break, come back in, and there's several things that you're going to grab out in the foyer. There's restrooms out there. Please, whatever, if you want to walk around. But there's 3 items. There's some food, there's some refreshments, some drinks, some things out there. Please take that. I have on a table a gift, 2 gifts for you. One is, I'm going to explain them later. One is a little wristband, and on it says Adullam. I want you to grab that. I'll explain why later. So everyone please grab one of the wristbands. And then you'll also find right outside the doors as you leave, there's a booklet, and on the front it says, a 30-day journey to peace. So when you come in, I want you to have one of these booklets, okay? You also are going to be handed just this little yellow sheet that you're going to fill out for us. It just helps us to know how you heard about the seminar, but also what other topics you're most interested in as we plan for the upcoming year, different topics. So several things out there for you. Please go and take a break. You'll hear some music, come back in. Rachel will lead us in some more songs, and then we'll get into part 2 of our message today about living with certainty. Wristband, 30-day journey booklet, and you're also going to be handed a little piece of paper. Enjoy the refreshments out there. We'll see you in 10 minutes.